point equipment. We know a lot of people here have data point equipment, and I'm glad you do. And my recommendation is hang on to what you have, because it is kind of disappearing fast, in my opinion. I think there's caches out there somewhere. But at any rate, I bought this computer equipment off of eBay just recently. This is a really lucky find.
Oh, cool.
And I was searching around, trying to understand perhaps a little bit more about where this might come from. It has asset tags from the National Park Service on it. So lo and behold, I find I found an oral history from the folks up in Lake Roosevelt, Washington, where they talk about acquiring data point equipment in 1981, setting it up, doing the first payroll in the U.S. government, Park Service on a computer. There was, of course, nothing else out there at that time that was suitable. So they kept their equipment through the 1980s, and then they talked a little bit about trading out their equipment for PC-based equipment. So it turns out that contacting the guy that actually sold me the stuff, he said that he'd actually bought it as a government auction, several pallets of government auction equipment in Idaho. So apparently this equipment had been packaged up on pallets, wound up in Idaho. He winds up bidding on it almost 20 years ago now, and didn't know what it was, stores it in his basement, never turned it on, never did anything like that. And we wound up buying it, and now I've actually restored one of them. This is actually a 3800 that I've converted into an 1800 to boot off of floppies. So that gives you an idea, in my opinion, how rare data point equipment is becoming. I think it's a lot of it was owned by corporate customers and wasn't saved, and didn't survive until the new era when people were collecting equipment, recycling, etc. So so anyway, so I wish I had a time to plug it in and boot it up. It does run. I've got some software. I don't have a lot of software. I don't have a lot of documentation with it, but we can't get it to work. Oh, sorry. But what I would like to do is talk a little bit about data point things that you might have in collecting and keeping things. The first thing I'd like to say is that if you have some data point equipment, there's only one or two things you can do with it. Keep it, which I would recommend first. Keep it as your personal collection. The second thing is donate it to somebody who does want to collect it. I'm not necessarily the person that would be the best person to collect this stuff, but I have been associated in the last year and a half with the Austin Computer Museum up in Austin. Just a little museum. This is a Texana story, by the way. The data point is. It's not West Coast. It's not East Coast. It all happened in San Antonio. So they have the ability to collect and hold a reasonable amount of data point equipment. Actually, I've given them a little bit of what I have, and we built an exhibit. So if you're ever up in Austin, please take a look. The second thing is that we actually, based on setting up our exhibit, we found a few people. We knew some people were going to come through and say, I worked at Data Point, I knew about Data Point. So it turns out the sales, the director of sales in Houston, who used to call in all the oil companies, came through one day and said, guess what? I have a 10 by 20 storage unit in Houston. I haven't even put the key in it in the lock in over 15 years, and it's packed completely full of Data Point equipment. So yeah, that was great. And so we got the biggest panel van we could. We went up there, we recovered everything. So now they have, I think, the largest cache of Data Point equipment anything, as far as I know. I hope maybe somebody could prove me wrong or show me another cache. But anyway, we've got 8600s, 8660 turbos, thin clients, Wanco drives, 6600s, 8200.
You need a service contract?
Absolutely, as long as it's free to us, because we have no money whatsoever. Absolutely, we would love to have a service contract, a no-cost service contract. So I'm ready to sign a piece of paper anytime. And
Audie, what about 50 trinkets and 300 T-shirts?
Oh, yes.
Data point.
Absolutely. That's really the big issue is that what do you do with this stuff that you have, these valuable things that you have?
They hold the armor up.
right, absolutely. And
I stuff them behind. It's about 300.
About 300. Well, I would love it. So the other part of the Austin Computer Museum that's doing something fairly interesting, and I'm trying to bootstrap something more significant out of it. But turns out that the University of Texas School of Information wanted to launch a project to, first of all, start archiving game software, or software games, and then ultimately wanted to find out, develop a way to archive computers and computer history, which is more than just simply collecting hardware or software documentation, but it's an amalgam of history, documents, original documents, individuals' collections, etc. So the National Archive has given them, UT and the Computer Museum in Austin, their first grant to look at developing a type of database that would allow people to collect images and things like that. So there's a little bit of a start towards something perhaps larger in the future. You know, again, it's up to your own personal feelings about collecting and what you want to keep, and you know, do you trust that the Computer Museum in Austin will have this stuff forever? You know, what happens if they go through transitions, etc. But I would like to encourage you to think about what you have. If you have spares or extras, if you'd like to have somebody scan and document the items that you have, if you wish to donate them, whatever, there is the Austin Computer Museum. As far as I know, they're the only museum that has any data point equipment on display.
I think the Computer Museum in Mountain View does.
What do they have? Maybe one thing? Because they have a lot of stuff.
One or two, but they have about 25 hours of personal DVDs of interviews with ex-data point.
Which I think is extremely valuable. And I mean, those are great interviews. I've watched those interviews and they're really interesting. And also there's a online site, bidsavers.org, that's been collecting user manuals and code and so on. And so there are different outlets for it. And again, it's up to your own personal feelings. What do you want to do with this things that you have? But I do feel like this is true, and that is that the volume of things out there, the accessibility of things is waning, you know, now. And it's time to think about collecting, and it's time to think about preservation. And I just wanted to open up that forum. I don't know the answers. I can't say that I know exactly where I give you any particular advice. But what I would advise you to do is think about it and decide what you'd like to do, and make donations if you can to relevant places.
Good.
Okay.
One quick story. Back in the 80s, when Atari games
It's over.
you could buy a plug-in that would go into the game slot. It had a dual 1200 baud download, 150 baud upload modem. Very much like data point. Henry Danzas took an 1800, modified the modem so it looked exactly like the pay-for-game modem. And all you had to do is get an Atari with one of those pay-for-games. They gave them away. You plug it in the game slot, stick a phone line in it. He made it automatically call and his kids grew up in a room that was just hot and sweaty and noisy and had a 24-hour day 1800 running with a Diablo disc or whatever it was. And for 10 years, he allowed you to sign up and you could play any game that Atari had for free. And you had to sign up as to whether you were over or under 18. If you were over 18, he had a special set of games which you could get. That thing ran until the late 90s. And it was hard to give up 1,000 free games. But he's probably still got it. Where's Audie? There you go. I'll give control back to you.
Well, I'm actually done.
You're,
That's my pitch.
well, you're not.
Yeah, what you're looking for is
What is that control?
Ground control to Major Tom. That's the bamboozle you to take the money.
Right. Well, I just want to say, you know, if you would like to contact me, I think it's easy to contact me. If you'd like to talk to me about any advice as far as what to do with your items, things like that, I'd be happy to talk to you all about it. And otherwise, let me just turn this over to Rick.
Thank you all for coming this year. We're going to do it again next year, and I'd like to recognize right now my fellow committee members. Would you all please stand up and let's give a hand to all the people that made help.